God bless you. God bless you again on this beautiful Sunday morning. We're so thankful again for all of you who are tuning in every Sunday morning for our broadcast. I am Mark Oliver from Ebenezer Chapel, and I am very, very appreciative for you that have routinely tuned in to hear our broadcast. We're certainly grateful for you. We ask you to like our broadcast, share it on YouTube, share it on Facebook. Call a friend. In particular, today we're going to be sharing some messages who are what we call the atheist culture, and we want them to tune in to us this morning in particular. So those who are atheists, agnostics, individuals who have marginal belief that there is a creator. We've put together a lesson specifically for you, for something for you to talk about, consider, and discuss. We are, however, very grateful that you are willing to tune in to us every week. This one will not be a theological lesson, since we're speaking to individuals who are largely part of atheistic culture. We're going to try another mic. That one seems to be skipping, so forgive us for that little change. At any rate, we're going to get right into what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about creation versus evolution. It is amazing to me how still the view of Darwinian evolution is being pushed and published in our schools and even in some college campuses. And we're going to be discussing that a little bit. I want to first make this disclaimer. I'm not a microbiologist. I'm not a biologist at all. So I'm going to be dealing with a little bit of science on molecular structure and DNA. I'm going to be briefly talking about it for you gentlemen and ladies who are extremely well versed in biology. I'm certain that I'll be making some mistakes perhaps in my syntax and how I share this, but try to understand my overall view and what I'm going to be sharing today about why believers or Christians believe what they believe. I want you to know that there are many Christians who are very scientifically astute, that we do not consider Christianity to be anti-science. In fact, we don't think science is twisted or perverted or evil. Science is certainly a part of our natural life, our natural atmosphere, as part of our daily life. And so we know that science plays a massive role in the world itself. And so there are some people who think that if you're a Christian, you're almost devoid of anything that's associated with science, that you think science is ridiculous. And there are some who think that you can't be scientifically astute and still be a believer. We hope to debunk that to some extent today with our very limited, primitive knowledge on science. But we want to talk about something, a discovery that's been made in the scientific world that we think is important for you to know. Science, we believe, is actually proving that there is a God. Some of you are going to chuckle when you hear that. That's okay. We're hoping that as time goes on, you will consider some of the other scientists who are launching some literature, some writings, some books, as well as some videos and podcasts that are discussing the subject matter that we're going to be talking about today. So what we're really talking about is this first slide. As you see, this beautiful solar system that we're part of. It's quite incredible. The planets, how this is put together, how accurate, and how just slight changes would make our world completely different. We live near a star called the Sun. This particular star I'm not going to get into its mass and heat. There is a science on all of those issues, but I am always awed by the fact that the Earth is a very perfect distance away from the sun, just a few miles farther away, just a few miles closer, it would be uninhabitable for us. And it's just amazing that it just so happens to be at the right distance. We know that the Earth rotates. There's a rotation around it, and this rotation, and it also, we rotate and we also sort of tip on an axis which creates our seasons, and everything that about it is perfectly balanced. But for you scientists, I'm certain that you're saying how wonderful nature has created our solar system. But I want to get a little farther into it. I want you to consider some things that other scientists have discovered. We want to talk about this series that we're going to be getting into is going to be called A Discussion on the Origin of Life. This has been a massively debated subject. I am concerned because I believe that there are discoveries that are made in the scientific world that substantiate the teachings of Scripture and the Bible. And even though the scientists are not theologians, they're not necessarily believers, I think that they have an obligation and integrity in terms of science to reveal and share the discoveries. They certainly don't have to support biblical views. That's not their responsibility. But they should, at the very least, launch forth that which they learn about what new developments and discoveries have been made in the scientific world. In my next slide, the real big question is going to be between the next two slides as we break it down. Did God make the world? Well, that's the big question. Is there some supreme being that made the world? Some people are actually acknowledging that there's something up there, they'll say. I don't know what it is or who he is, but some will agree that there is someone up there. But there are many, many others who support their view of life on, in my next slide, evolution. The father of the first theory, or major launching of the first theory of evolution, as many of you know, was this gentleman, Charles Darwin. I have a lot to say about him. I have a lot to say, I don't know how much I'm going to get in my short time, about his discovery or his hypothesis or theory that's made its way into most American textbooks. Most young people who come up through the school system are taught at least some level of Charles Darwinian theory of evolution. The previous slide I showed a hand of God. And this one I am showing what many of you scientists believe is the origin of life. This is what Charles Darwin proposed. He believed that cell life had many, many mutations. He based it on some discoveries that he made, some observations. That's what part of evolution is, observations. He made it based on observations, and I probably should have put the slide in. There's a slide that shows birds and the many variations of the beak of the same bird, and he suggested that these changes were evolutionary changes. The broad spectrum of evolution believes that there were microorganisms that multiplied and eventually formed, and I'm skipping a lot, fish, and that eventually these fish-like creatures became somewhat amphibious. That is, that they were both on land, on water, that they had a different type of skin type, but also had the ability to also navigate on land. Those over many, many billions of years, that process of evolution caused a stream or a branch of beings to become earthbound, 100% earthbound. These creatures began to consistently change. I would be somewhat maybe unfair to some and fair to others to say that these cells mutated. Those mutations formed other forms that became ape-like, and of course I'm only dealing with one stream. There are many, many streams. As we know, there are many distinct animal types, shapes, with different capacities, abilities. But if we're going to deal with his view on how the man came about, then we came to certain kinds of chimpanzee forms, which became more and more sophisticated over time. As you can see, we began to, according to the theory of evolution, began to stand more upright until we came to the modern Homo sapien. We became man. And so we want to discuss, in the next few weeks, we want to add some science into our lesson, but we want to talk about what's out there, what's being taught. Is there validity for the story of the Bible, creation, which then supports what we largely teach is salvation, or is there more of a scientific viewpoint in that there is no God, that we were completely evolved from other organisms, and the whole God thing is a myth? That brings me to the real issue of truth. And I'm going to discuss truth for a couple minutes. I'm certainly not going to discuss the discussion that Oprah Winfrey had on truth, but I am going to capture what she said. I'm going to say first, can we examine these two opposing views and discover truth? Is there such thing as truth? On her platform, she had truth. It's more important now than ever. So we are living at a point where truth is being challenged. People are saying that, using phrases like your truth, my truth, that in many areas there is no absolute truth. This gets into a lot of the major debates that we hear today. And I want to take a moment to just maybe, and I hope I'm not going out on a limb, to debunk the view, your truth, my truth. There is some validity to your truth, my truth. I'm going to use something kind of crude, but I found this online to make my point. There's a restaurant, I can't advertise for them, they're near here in the next slide, where you can go in and choose your meal. When you walk into this particular restaurant, you can go in and you can decide which steak you want. Before you get to your table, you can stop at a glass case and you can examine which steak is the best. Some people like the sirloin. Some people think that the sirloin cut is the best. Others would swear by the ribeye. They'd make the argument that has lots of marbling and fat in the middle, and they would think that that's the king of steaks. Others, I recently had a porterhouse. I don't buy porterhouses regularly, I will admit. They're rather expensive, but not too long ago I did have quite a delicious porterhouse steak. And there are some who would suggest that the porterhouse is the best tasting steak. Others like the New York strip or the T-bone. I think that the T-bone has some distinctive elements because it's cooked with the bone in the meat, along with the meat and the marbling. And then there are some that say you can't even talk about steak unless you talk about the filet. I once, years ago, went out of town and had the best filet mignon that I ever had in my life. Now, I got into that. I know it's a bit off the subject, but I got into that to really debunk this view about your truth, my truth. There are certain things that are your truth and certain things that are my truth. We used to just call that opinion. And now it's made its way into the political arena, and people make the phrase, your truth, my truth. Well, the real issue is we all have opinions on things. Your opinion is just as valuable as mine. Or maybe I should have said it the other way, mine is just as valuable as yours. But we must understand that there is a distinction between things that are opinion and what are absolute truths. This is what we want to get to. We want to get to what is absolutely unequivocally true. There are many subjects that opinion is the king, but in many areas we must say that there are absolute truths. I don't want to insult you with something real simple like mathematics, but there are some facts that we just can't change. And there are some facts of science that we just can't change. And we need to be honest enough, if we're going to discuss the subject of creation and evolution, whether or not we're going to deal with real facts or facts that we can say are facts. And we know that evolution has to be tested and observed in order for it to be validated. I want to make this statement about Charles Darwin. This is not a quote. This is my weak attempt to discuss the subject with the little bit of molecular knowledge and biology that I do know. Charles Darwin, back in the 1800s, middle of the 1800s, 1855, posed a theory that the origin of life probably started by cells that changed or evolved over time. That's how he got his famous natural selection. Probably over 100 million years ago, and this is really interesting how they come up with numbers to suggest how many years that some of these things would take. It's actually well into the billions. However, scientists have learned so much more about the cell on a molecular structure. So it has been proven, this is non-religious, this is atheist scientists have discovered, have figured out that Charles Darwin, number one, and his contemporaries knew very, very little about intricate cellular science. And so much of what he shared does not really fit with modern science and technology as it relates to molecular science. Most scientists now realize that Charles Darwin did not know much about cells back then or his contemporaries, making his assertions quite unscientific. Yet he is still hailed as one of the greats in the natural selection ideology world. So he still has a massive hand on an influence in our science and in our schools. To my concern as a teacher, and in our colleges, students are being influenced to believe that there's no God and that we are made by chance. Really, the idea of evolution really means that our world is purely made by chance. Your brain came about by chance. It is the sum of many molecular accidents that just lined up just so to create something as complex as you. Your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth. It would be wonderful if I had time to get into the science of just some of those senses that you possessed and just discuss how intricate they are and to suggest that they all came about by a defined accident. But I do know, and you know, that even if you're not a scientist, you can sense when someone has designed something, when it's not an accident, when it's a purposeful creation. You can tell. You can look on. You can tell the difference between a rock that you find on the ground that just happened to break off of a large mountain, and whether or not it's something that someone created. I'm going to show you a slide really quick. I'm always a little bit partial to art. So in my next slide, I just want you to take a look at this. I hope I have the right slide up, but it is a slide. How did such an elaborate carving come about? This is a multiple choice question. How did this elaborate carving come about in the tree? So I'm going to give all of you a quick test. There won't be a grade. You can keep your answer to yourself. But A, did a tornado cause the rocks and other articles to carve this image into this tree? B, did a flood occur many centuries ago, causing rocks to form this image of a man into the bark of this tree? C, were there animals that No doubt was sharpening their teeth on the clawing at this tree contributed to scratching a carving, and maybe some squirrels came by, and each one scratched, and after a while it began to form the face of a man. Or would your assumption be, although this is your first viewing of this carving, you would say an artist specialized in carving trees created this image? If your answer is D, you are correct. An artist who specialized in carving trees came along with his chisel and his grinding wheel, and he shaped this into the tree. That is, that we have enough sense to know when a designer has influenced something and when nature has influenced something. It is not wrong to believe in science and nature, but we have enough intelligence to know by observation and study whether one is true or the other. This is the issue that I want to discuss as we've been discussing the Bible, and we've been talking about salvation in the world. There are many of my viewers are atheists. Some of them are agnostics. That is, that they don't deny that there is a God. Yet at the same time, they don't necessarily say that there is a God. But I want to speak to their mindset. I want to challenge their view about, from a scientific perspective, I want them to consider whether or not what they have been taught is valid and whether there's been real links to facts for them to draw the conclusions that they have drawn. Here's my question to all of you and my scientific and atheist and agnostic friends. Why are the views touted as truth in our public schools that were pushed by Charles Darwin? And we're going to talk about why. How is it that these views are touted as absolutely truthful? If I wanted to be a little bit political and challenge some of the irrationalities in our governmental system, all of our presidents get sworn in with their hand on the Bible. Even the ones that I would dare say don't follow the Bible very well, they all get sworn in with their hands on the Bible. In my school, every day, my students are asked to stand up, put their hand over their heart, and pledge allegiance to the flag, in which they invoke one nation under God. And so we have this nation who still, to some extent, believes in God. Still, we have not denied the existence of God. But at the same time, we, in our schools, our students are being taught the first human, the science of human evolution, Smithsonian Intimate Guide to Human Origins, Into Africa, the theory of human evolution. So this is being hailed as truth, while at the same time we acknowledge God, and definitely when we have a national crisis, we get together and acknowledge God, and there is typically public prayer. So the first thing I want you to understand is humans can be fickle. We can be irrational. So for all of my friends who are listening in online, many of you go to games, you go to things where you hear and repeat. Some of you may not repeat, but we must admit that we don't understand everything. There are many things we don't know, and often when people talk about things in the science world, they're using scientific terminology, they're explaining things away, and most of us who are listening don't know some of the concepts that they're sharing, and so we're taught to take them for face value. Does life go from order to disorder? That's one of the first questions that I want to ask my friends. Does life go from disorder to order? So in other words, for those who actually believe in Charles Darwin's ideology, you believe in actually what happened prior to that was the Big Bang Theory. That at some point in our history or in the history of the universe, there was a large explosion. There are some that are suggesting this is true, even among the creationists. We believe if there was a Big Bang, we believe that that was God saying, let there be. and suddenly things appeared. What we want to say, though, for those that believe that it was a massive explosion, is it rational to suggest that things go from disorder to order? Would it make sense if you were or heard that a 747 jet, let's make it safe, everybody is disembarked, but there's been a problem in the engine, and while it's still on the runway, the whole plane explodes into a massive explosion with all of its parts, its plastic, its rubber, its vinyl, the engine compartments, all the titanium in the different parts of the engine, all the clamps and hoses and the engineering, the electronics, all the airplane cord, the vinyl of the seats, everything just explodes into smithereens. And after it all explodes into smithereens, we watch as the debris slowly makes its way back to Earth. But when it reaches Earth, it forms a new helicopter. That's how irrational things going from disorder to order are. Charles Darwin, we would say, was misinformed. We're going to talk a little bit about it. I'm not a biologist. I know just a little bit, but I'm going to share a little bit about what they have discovered about Charles Darwin's view. Cells are composed of water, inorganic ions, and carbon contain organic molecules. Water is the most abundant molecule in the cells, accounting for 70% or more of total cell mass. Now, cells replicate, but what they have found out since Charles Darwin has been around is that their cells are made up of little teeny machines. And these little teeny machines all have very distinct functions. And these different functions cause different things to happen in the cell, which allows for changes. And so there is an element of evolution that may be valid, and that is that within a species, there can be various changes. Some of you are saying, "Oh my God, is this a Christian lesson?" Just hang with me for a few minutes. So there are different little changes that can happen within a species that can make the species function better. There is proof that there are mutations, or I should say, little changes that occur in the cell and in the DNA strand to communicate that the specific species may need to adapt. It may need to make some changes to be able to function, to be able to do various different things. These are areas that Charles Darwin was not aware of. But there is absolutely, unequivocally no proof that these cells can mutate into something completely different or have a species change. We all know the difference between a cow and a sheep, or a horse and an elephant, or a zebra and a giraffe. These animals are completely different. They have different lung capacities. They have different bone structures. They have different colors, different shapes, different sizes, different weights. We have never seen a dog begin to grow wings. Yet, Charles Darwin's, the pillars of his ideologies have been launched as truth. I want you to take a look at just a smidgen of many of the things that God has made. The beauty of the flowers. You would be shocked at what it takes for each one of these flowers to have a different color, a different shape, a different fragrance, a different texture, to survive in different types of climates. What it would take for a bird, such as the one with that long, that's a horn-toed beak bird, what it would take for that bird's beak to have a different shape, a different color, the many different changes in DNA for that bird to have a completely different shape and size and color and ability, or this horn-toed lizard at the top. These animals suggest that someone was a great designer. There are many different species in monkeys. Monkeys are by no means the same. Their DNAs are incredibly different. There's a distinct difference between a monkey and a chimpanzee, and so many in a baboon. These animals that have similarities have incredible differences, and many of us only observe them, if we're not into science, we only observe them once or twice a year, maybe if you go to the zoo, but these animals have so many different variations. What it would take just for a monkey like this to have maybe just a different hair texture or a hair color requires so many changes in the DNA code for it to occur. And I admit that I am not a scientist. I'm speaking from a layman's perspective with a little bit of research that I know. I'm going to use this analogy that if you have a computer such as the one that I'm looking at in front of me, if I want this computer to operate differently, if I want it to have a new function, then none of the programs that are on this computer will perform that. I can't alter those functions. The only way that I can cause this computer to do something completely different is I have to give it a new set of code, a new set of directions, a completely new program. Many of you remember when computers first came out, that you'd go to the store, or some of them would come downloaded on it. It would have something called Word, or it would have a word processing program on it. The computer will not do word processing without that program. And there are many lines of code to make it function. Beings are the same. It takes many, many, many lines of code in order for a slight change to occur, and everything has to happen exactly right. If there's anything wrong, if anything doesn't line up exactly right, the species no doubt will die. How about this frog or toad? I can't remember which it is, but can you imagine the beauty of this little creature and the distinct colors? This suggests, like the tree bark that I showed you, that there was in fact a designer. For my scientific friends, this suggests that there was a designer. I want to show you something that is a helix of a DNA strand. I want you to take a look at the magnificence of God. This is a double helix as related to genomics. It's a term used to describe the physical structure of DNA. DNA molecule is made up of two linked strands that wind around each other to resemble a twisted ladder in a helix-like shape. Each strand has a backbone made of alternating sugar and phosphate groups. Attached to each sugar is one of the four bases: adenine A, cysteine C, guanine G, and thymine T. The two strands are connected by chemical bonds between the bases. This is something that is not an accident. This is more complex, more detailed. There is more code, there is more information in this one strand than that beautiful tree carving that we admired maybe 4 or 5 slides earlier. My point to you is this indicates there is in fact a creator. There is a designer. Somebody made this. This is not an accident of nature. I believe that our scientists owe it to the public. And some of them are coming out. Unfortunately, because our society is so godless and so opposed to accepting the notion of God, that they will not acknowledge that Charles Darwin's view is so far from reality. Many of the major scientists are admitting it. They're putting out books. Some of the names fail me, but many of them are admitting that Charles Darwin's view of evolution is impossible. Mathematically, it's impossible. There are too many things that must happen at the exact same time for it to be a reality. What is my conclusion in this somewhat scientific Christian lesson? God is the creator. I say to my atheistic friends, I've probably done, in your eyes, a very poor view in discussing this subject. But what I hope that you'll do is open up some of the newer textbooks, observe some of the new podcasts, read some of the literature, listen to some of the YouTube videos that discuss Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, and look at it in comparison to what we know now, what we understand, the deeper level of understanding DNA and the molecular structure and cell life. And you will have to admit that it is a fantastic viewpoint to suggest that all of these things fell into place accidentally. It only leaves one conclusion: there is a God. There is a creator. There is someone above us that has a magnificent mind to create all the things that he has created. I want to say this in my conclusion. My time is up. But most people, when they create something, they leave their signature on it. You know, most artists, you know, in the corner, they'll have like a little diagram indicating this was my artwork. Most architects that draw a drawing will have a little square somewhere on the drawing called the title block, and it will name the firm that wrote the blueprint or drew the blueprint up, and it'll give a scale and different information. I do believe that God has left his signature on his creation, the diversity, the distinctions, the beauty of his creation. If you could just go back up 3 slides for me. This is nothing but the handiwork of God. And so I want to say to you, my atheist friends, as we delve a little bit more in this subject, we're hoping that we're going to get some pushback and maybe someone who'll be willing to come in. We can have a discussion, a dialogue together. But we're going to continue talking about evolution and creation. I believe and know that there is a God. He is the Savior of the world. He is the one that if we follow him, our world will change. If you follow him, your life will change. Many of you who are distraught over many of the things that are going on in this world, I adjure you, I challenge you to believe in the Creator. He loves you in spite of all that's going on in our world. He loves you. He wants to save you, wants to make your life beautiful. May God bless you. Tune in again to us next week. And before I go, I just want to remind you that the month of June will be our harvest celebration. And we're asking all of you that are in the area, Greater New Haven area and around, to attend. All 4 Sundays in the month of June will be our harvest celebration, culminating with the last Sunday. We will have a free meal here, and we're inviting all of you that will come to enjoy us worshiping God. May God bless you.